Hi, everyone, and welcome to Purple Coach Conversations with Tanya and myself. So, I'm Anne, and as you can see, Tanya is there. So, our goal is to normalize, educate, and inspire conversations around diversity, race, and equality and inclusion. We are both mothers, Tanya and I. We're both entrepreneurs, and we're both coaches as well. We created Purple Coach Conversations not as experts around diversity but more to inspire conversations and to have people on to Purple Coach Conversations with something interesting and unique to say about their journeys and about their experiences around diversity and inclusion.
So today we are very honored to have April and Aaron all the way in Florida in the US, our second guests from the US. April and Aaron both served for 10 and 20 years respectively in the US Air Force as dental laboratory technician before moving on to different passion and roles that they'll tell us about shortly. They both created Faven, which is a platform that helps mobile vendors and businesses, small businesses, reach out to new customers. So thank you so much, April and Aaron, and welcome to Purple Coach Conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So we wanted to hear from you respectively, obviously. I know you don't want to go through all the diplomas you have, but we still want to hear from you. We want to hear about your journey and you know what you've created, your baby Faven, and how you got to where you are today. So we'll leave it to you.
So I joined the military right out of high school. I did 10 years active duty as a dental laboratory technician, like you said, which is where I met Aaron. And after I decided to separate from the Air Force and go see if we could make this thing work together, he and I went to school for a little while. I got my bachelor's degree. I served at the VA in Austin, Texas for about 5 years in the mental health clinic. And from there, I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I started my first company as a popcorn maker, and that was really fun. I kind of roped Aaron into it. He ended up having to work 2 full-time jobs, basically, one his regular one and then one helping me on evenings and weekends. So but that is how Faven was created. We were mobile vendors. We had to always find locations to do pop-up shops, and we just got tired of doing the same old thing like farmers markets on weekends. So from those experiences of being a popcorn person, we decided Faven needed to be created for the very large gap in the industry of vendors and venues. So, and I'm currently working on a master's in small business entrepreneurship. So that's me.
Wow.
Awesome. Brilliant.
I guess it's my turn.
It's your turn.
Aaron, her husband, as she mentioned, I'm a man of many mistakes. One of my greatest mistakes being dropping out of college after my freshman year, which led me to the Air Force in my 20-year career, which again was probably the best mistake I've ever made because it helped me be the person I am today and kind of find myself and develop some of my disciplines and habits and character traits, which now help me help other people in many different ways. So in a nutshell, that's just kind of who I am.
Love that. Love how you haven't just said what you do, but how you kind of define that the mistakes, you know, you can turn a mistake into a success. And that's the key.
That is the key.
You haven't said though something about your website that I asked you about. You're Lean-Six Sigma Green Belt certified.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Lean/Six Sigma is tools that the Japanese kind of perfected in manufacturing with the auto industry and how they eliminated mistakes and inefficiencies, and they measured things down to like the 100th of a second, right? So any time that they could get back has a price or a value to it. So this methodology is all about the elimination of waste and being very efficient at what it is you do. So finding ways within a process to eliminate waste, whether that's money, whether it's man hours, being people sitting around, or duplication of tasks, those types of things. So I'm somewhat of a process or efficiency expert, if you will.
Yeah, it's not mentioning like he's also a guru. He's a certified life coach and a realtor. He's got a lot of different things under his belt, but he's pretty humble, so he won't mention them.
Yes, a jack of all trades, as we say.
Yeah, but for me though, all those things really hone around the one key component of my life, which is to help people be better at some aspect of their life, whether it's finding a house or being efficient about how they go about their daily business, or just helping them in, life coaching things, basic life skills and things of that nature.
Fantastic.
Really interesting. I think I'll be coming to the efficiency skills, Aaron. I could definitely deal with that. I'm queen of procrastination sometimes, and it's just like, yeah, yeah. And it's just like focus, and one of the questions as well that I think was when we spoke last time, I think it was also really interesting is you both have a background in the U.S. Army, and it's would love to hear from you what your experience was like for you. So for you as a white woman and for you as a black man, and how you've navigated in that environment.
So I mean, for both of us, from a different perspective, we would both be the minority in that group, right? Me as a black male and her as a white female, because it's largely white males dominated, especially in leadership positions and things of that nature. Um, the difference is that it is hard to tell or directly make a correlation between what could be stimulated or classified as racism, right? Because it's all covered up under the uniform and guidelines and rules and regulations. So it could be racially motivated, but you wouldn't be able to specifically pinpoint that that was the reason or justification for some things happening. And of course, the other component for me, being a black male, I was stationed in places across the US and even abroad at times where when you would show up at a certain location, a part of the in processing would be them letting you know that maybe you should avoid this part of town or that part of town because there are Ku Klux Klansmen there, or they're known to do things against people that look like you. So those are some of the things. But outside of that, it really just a smaller microcosm of society in general. So you face the same challenges that you would in the uniform, maybe as you don't outside the uniform.
And I'd say for me, like personally, I didn't really get to see a lot of the racism in the military. Maybe Aaron had a different perspective. I'm sure he did. But what I ended up doing was going from like a very black and white world where I was living, you were either black or white, and there was really nothing in between. And then going to the military where it was this melting pot of different cultures and people, I actually felt like I learned so much more from being in the military, getting to live in different places, different countries, and experiencing different cultures. But as a woman, the military is still very man heavy. There's much more men than there are women in the military. And, being white didn't hurt. I don't know that it helped, but it didn't hurt my career, that's for sure. But I would say, like, being a woman in general, you have to kind of alter who you are just to fit in with the world that you live in, with a very male dominant world. So I think this is changing. It's been 20 years since I first joined the military. So over 20 years since I joined. So I know things have changed since I've gotten out. And I think, they're trying their best to, make things easier for women and not so, blatantly like male dominant. But I think it was hard. I mean, I think for women in general, it's hard to be a woman, period. Like most of the places of leadership are male dominant. So it's not any different in the military. You just kind of have to prove yourself a little bit more. They make some, differences, like they accommodate women for different things. Like, if you have a baby, they'll give you military or maternity leave. At first they wouldn't giving men leave for paternity leave, but now I think they're starting to add that in too. But also like with your fitness levels and stuff like that, they make some accommodations to make sure that, you know, they're considering women for the different, you know, aspects of women versus man. But yeah, it's a hard place to be. I don't know. I think anyone, any young person should join the military to get that experience. But I will just, you know, caution it to women that there's still things that are going on that you have to be very careful for, and just protect yourself and have people there to kind of protect you too. So we can probably go into that in another discussion, but this is just, you know, pretty general. Just yeah.
That's really interesting as well, because you know, just going back to what you say first, Aaron, about being undercover, and I guess we talk about like microaggressions as well sometimes, where you know it's there, but it's not so much in your face that you can't actually call it out very obviously, which makes it harder as well to be in that environment. And I thought it was actually really interesting that in this time and age, or I know it was a while back, but you know, living in the US, and I know obviously there's a lot of racism there, but still in uniform as someone in the military, you still have to be cautious of where you go. I find that quite fascinating and sad in a way, um, as well. That is still an issue. Um, April, did you feel that there were certain places as well that you, as a woman, you know, as you're talking about being careful and being aware, did you find that there were certain things that you were also pre-warned, perhaps by other people in the army, like, you know, you want to avoid this place? Because just kind of thinking out loud, I remember I've got friends in the army here in the UK, and every time they're posted to Afghanistan, it's like a debrief of, you know, cultural differences and all of that, and what they can and cannot do, and so on. But just as a woman, specifically perhaps more in the States, where it was not necessarily a cultural thing that you had to be aware of, or religious thing that you had to be aware of, did you find that you also had to navigate certain things specifically just because you're a woman?
Yeah, I think you know, the Air Force is kind of one of the easier branches to be in. There's definitely more females in the Air Force than in other branches. But I would say, I mean, with any woman, you have to protect yourself. Like underage drinking is very popular in the military, and so you end up in places that you shouldn't be, and hanging out with people that maybe seem like friends but then end up not being friends to you, and you don't really find that out until later. But you know, I caution every woman, no matter where they are, what stage of life they are, just be very careful. Make sure you have friends around you that care about you and really want to make sure that you get home safely at night. And I would say, especially for the military, even being deployed like to places where maybe there's not a lot of women, just make sure that you find someone, and they, you know, we call them wingmen or airmen or whatever, but just make sure that you have a wingman to protect you and to look out for you. Maybe one of you gets a little bit more inebriated than the other, so you make sure the other one is safe. You know, I think you always have to keep your guard up as a woman. You never get to really let your guard down. So that's an advice I give to everybody. Make sure you have trustworthy people around you. You know, don't just go into situations that can lead to bad other situations. So yeah, so I would say just drinking, especially, you know, I don't really think drugs are a big problem in the military. They could be, but they also, you know, you end up getting kicked out if you have drugs. So I think it's more of a drinking culture there in the military.
Thanks for sharing. I want to go back a little bit to also what Aaron was saying, that that, you know, the military is like a small society in some way, and especially when it comes to you know, understanding diversity, when it comes to race. But it doesn't feel like it's a little society when it comes to, you know, diversity, when it comes to gender. It feels that actually there's more awareness of the racial diversity than the gender diversity from the way you are talking about it. And thank you for sharing that, because it's an interesting perspective. Whilst maybe in other countries it might be the reverse, you know, the race might not be acknowledged, but the gender might be more acknowledged. And you have that, I think, in actually big corporates, the focus has been on gender more than race most of the time, right? And now finally they're bringing awareness to the racial part of things, and they've seen that most corporates weren't equipped to actually tackle the diversity issues. And in our past interviews, we had diversity experts talking about that, you know, they only had events around diversity and inclusion. It wasn't part of the identity of the leaders, etc., and how they're trying to change that now. And so it was an interesting perspective that you brought, how that, you know, diversity issue can be different, completely different, even if it's a small part of society. For race, it's not for gender, right? So thank you for that insight.
Yes. So I guess in some ways the military is different in the U.S. is because it is in a lot of ways an escape for a lot of people. And most of those people are going to be the same populations, those underserved, rural, minority-based people, right? They'll see the military as a way out. They'll get paid, they'll get to travel, they'll get housing, they'll get food. So it's an avenue for them to do better. So more of them are willing to join. Most of the white males, I say most, I'm generalizing in a huge way, but most of what you see as it relates to white males are those who went to college and became an officer. So they are then in charge in the military. Mm-hmm. So you have those of us who enlisted because we're trying to get out, or we failed out of school, or whatever the case may be. And then we have those that went to college and now they're an officer. So they're still hold the authority in that structure. So it doesn't really change, like inside the military with the uniform and outside without. It's still the same hierarchy, same situations. It just looks different because you have a uniform on.
Yeah, right. That's so important. So basically, the society aspect is, you can see it in the ranks, in the seniority.
Yeah. And it shows up a lot where you then get into some questions of racism is usually around, as it is outside, it's around discipline. This person was disciplined to the max, and this person wasn't. This offense was greater, yet they got less. And the only thing you can pinpoint and say what's different is, well, one looks different than the other. But you can't really say for sure that race was involved in, deciding what level of discipline was adequate. Yeah. Same as what we look at when we look at the outcomes of all these things that are going on now. We can't determine, well, why did they get less or why did they get more? Same situation.
Yeah, that must give you a lot of, it has given me a lot of growth as a coach yourself today, to be able to kind of coach people from a complete diverse background, white, black, any, background, understanding what might hold them back and how they might be perceived, which is the lack of teaching that we face in our coaching industry. I find here, we were talking about this with Anne, and you have that advantage of having understood those biases and being able to help people the best way you could.
Yeah, oftentimes in situations I'd rather have avoided, but life placed me there, so I got to see up close and personal, like what could happen and what certain things will happen to some people and not others.
Indeed. We both had to escort people to jail or prison in the military at times. Like I escorted a Black female to jail. I think she went AWOL or something, and she got like the maximum punishment for that. And that was while we were stationed in Germany. And I think he escorted someone as well, but a white male. So different scenarios, but definitely different. Go ahead.
What did the white male? What punishment did the white male get in comparison?
Well, he went to federal prison.
Yeah.
But he is stolen. He stole a Kevlar vest or something, like some huge items military items, these bulletproof vests. He had stolen them, lied about it, and done other little things. So I think they just packaged it all up together because this guy's a pain to just get rid of them. And that's kind of the route that he had taken. So his was probably justified. I mean, after the course of, all the court trials and time wasted, he had chances to get out of that extreme punishment, but he chose not to.
Yeah, that's I guess that's something you see on a daily basis, that the world got awareness. And by the world, I also say that I got awareness with George Floyd. And when I speak to sometimes I had a one-to-one last week with a person who has a radio show, and she asked me, how come it took so long to have your eyes open? You should have seen that before. And this is something that happens on a daily basis. And yeah, and it's just weird how the mind functions sometimes. We get blind. We have our blind spots, and we literally don't see. There's no awareness of what we have in front of us, and we need a trigger like George Floyd to be able to have this sense of awareness. It's yeah. So I mean, that's yes.
That's that's where white privilege comes in. Yeah. Like the fact that we don't have to think about stuff because it's not in our face. Like, I haven't had that privilege since we've been married, but you know what I mean? Like the idea that you can put blinders on because it's not happening to you or in your family or in your community. Like, I don't think people really understand white privilege fully because they don't really understand how they get to benefit from it. And it's really just less stress. It's less every day thinking about the worst possible scenario. That is a privilege to not have to think about in those terms on a daily basis. Whereas Black communities are always on high alert, always stressed out. And stress levels lead to health problems, which lead to other things. So when we say white privilege, it's not, just one thing. It encompasses a lot. So
yeah,
I tend to disagree that maybe we had to witness George Floyd for everybody to say, "Oh, there's a problem." That stuff, as you were told, has been happening daily, weekly, monthly, yearly for however long. It's no different than you and I walking down the street, and at the end of the street, if I asked you, "Did you see any homeless people and how many?" You don't notice them anymore. They've always been there. It is no different. I'm aware of every homeless person I pass. I know homelessness is an issue. Now, whether I do something about it or not, that's a separate choice that I have to make. But to say that I'm unaware of it just because it doesn't impact me personally, that's not true. So it's really just a choice or decision that we've all made to turn a blind eye to certain things. And for each of us, those things are different.
I think, talking to the point of that as well, what you mentioned as well, April, is the privilege, the white privilege that has allowed you not to be able to see these things in the first place because you've never had to face issues of being followed in a store, suspected of shoplifting, or being racially abused for no reason whatsoever, rather than you just exist in a different skin color, or all these other things that a lot of Black people go through. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was telling Tanya, well, I went out for drinks with a friend of mine who was white, and we got into this discussion about Black Lives Matter, and anyway, it went south quite fast because they thought it was absolute rubbish. And the next thing I know, I was getting racially abused by the 6 white guys, and my friend just said, "Look, we need to leave." And she said, she looked at me, and she's white, and she was like, "I can't believe that they did that." And I was like, well, it's not the first time. It's happened so many times. But because it's something that she's never had to experience being a white person, again, we talk about privilege coming in so many ways, just even the ability to go out for drinks with your friends and be able to have a conversation without being racially abused, like have opinion without it being turned into abuse and aggression. But I which kind of brings me to one of the questions as well that we have for you, talking about white privilege. April, do you find that your idea of uh, do you find that before you met Aaron, your idea of white privilege was different? And then having obviously been with Aaron, seeing what he experiences and all of that, I'm sure you're more aware of just how privileged you are. But I'm trying to get an understanding of like what was that for you before and after being with Aaron
Well,
in
there's not
terms
really
of
much before Aaron. We've been together for a long time. We've been
okay.
married for 10 years and been kind of together for longer than that. But I think my world was very inclusive. I believe, I feel like my world was pretty inclusive with the military and having so many really great friends from so many different backgrounds, that it was probably a little bit harder for me to recognize what white privilege was until like someone sat down or I read up on what it actually meant. So uh and it's interesting, like people still don't get it, like, right, like white people still don't get it because we still there's an influencer that was recently like eyes open finally on what white privilege meant, and I was watching her Instagram live while she was talking about her cleaning lady, and someone was writing in the comments like your privilege is showing. And instead of just ignoring the comment, she kind of went in on this person like, yeah, I work hard, I do this, I do that, I didn't have any money when I first started, blah 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 blah. So she got into a lot of hot water with that. She made it even worse, by trying to blame everybody else for her opinions and stuff like that. Um, but what I was trying to explain to somebody, because once you know what it is and how to explain it, it's easier, right? Because, or at least it makes sense to you. You think it's going to make sense to someone else. But when you say like white privilege has nothing to do with your finances, people don't go, oh, really? Like they always try to connect privilege to how much money you have in the bank account. And that's not at all true. Like white privilege basically means you're starting out higher than everybody else just based on the color of your skin alone. Now, what you do from there, you can accumulate more privilege or you can just sit with it where you're at. But basically everybody else without white skin has to even get up to this level to go further. So people's starting levels aren't the same, and people don't see that. People just think, well, I don't have any money, my parents didn't give me any money. It has nothing to do with finances, like literally nothing. And so I think people try to explain it away that they don't have privilege because they don't have money or they didn't have money to start with. And we've very clearly seen that that's not at all the case. It could literally being stopped by a police officer and not getting a ticket because you're not Black, or not even getting pulled over even though you did something stupid, just because the police could see through your windows and see that you're a white person. Like there's so many ways that white people are getting privilege and not even knowing it. Like that's why it's hard for them to understand, because they don't even realize they're getting a privilege, because there's nothing like showing them the opposite. So
yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
before it's not much, but
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but what you're saying is, I was remembering the book from Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility, and what she says is that thing is white people, whether they like it or not, they have privileges. That's it, and that is the concept of white privilege, and they, like you said, they're trying to say yes, but I'm a woman, and I also get gender discrimination. So how can that be like white supremacy or white fragility, etc.? But it's a different concept, and sometimes it's a little mixed up. Everything is mixed up. But it's just, if we take a simple example, such as an example of, when she tries to get a taxi in the UK, which is an example she's shared recently, and that she had, like, if she's trying to hail a taxi, it might be harder for her to get the taxi to stop than a white friend, and she's had that lived experience here in London. So that's the privilege that we're talking about, and it affects every single part of your life. And to bounce back on what Aaron was saying, I do agree with your comparison of the homeless, that we're not seeing, and we decide what we want to do about it. But I think George Floyd kind of triggered something more in the sense of it's death and life and death. Okay, I know the homeless is also life and death, but it's not someone deciding whether a person is worth or not, me putting my knee on top of, kind of thing, and their survival. And I think that's what really struck a chord. I'm not very good at expressions in English, so sorry if it's not the right expression, but that's what actually really kind of hit us to the, until our bones. For most people, it's that realization. I'm going to stop talking because the kids are here, so you can carry on, because there's going to be a bit of noise now.
No worries. It's the joy of working from home with all our little ones. No, I see what you're saying, Tanya, and I think maybe the fact we, like, a lot of Black people know and white people know as well that we've been killed so unproportionately in comparison, especially more so in the US. I know in the UK, Black people also face a lot of discrimination purely based on the fact that we're Black, like nothing else. And there's all these other concepts of white privilege still exist, and all of that. But I think in the US, when you look at the shooting rate by police officers, and I think there's something to do with the policing there as well, in terms of how they are allowed to police in the US in comparison to other countries, even across Europe. How the gun laws as well in the US allow people to carry guns in the rate that they do, and therefore the police are also armed, and then they just go absolute, batshit, quite frankly, because you've put you've given a racist a gun and a badge and a uniform, and then send him out there, and and then they justify it as it was part of being on duty and things like that. Well, we know very well that the white kid that shot up, so I don't remember his name, that Black church, walked out in handcuffs and was offered water. It's that kind of ridiculous comparisons it's so blatantly clear there's a lot of racism issues that need to be handled, even in the police force, as well as just in society in the US. I guess the thing, I don't know with George Floyd, I have to say as well for myself, despite knowing that it's been happening, and I've been like talking to family members and friends about this well before George Floyd, and raising issues around the discrimination, because I've been subjected to it for 20 years plus, having lived in the UK. I don't know if it's first of all two things: the fact that we're on a lockdown, and the world had kind of stopped as well, and it made people just have time to stop from their busy lives and actually think about other people's society, the new crazy world that we're currently living in lockdown. I think maybe that was one aspect as well that helped, but I think also the fact that this guy, it was filmed, the whole 9 minutes plus was filmed for everyone to see. The begging, the pleading, the whole horrific scene. I mean, there was just no turning back. There was just no more pretending or walking past by the homeless person. As you say, Aaron, you could not. And we saw it across the world, and I think maybe that is, I don't know if that's what you're referring to, Tanya, when sometimes you're going through stuff and you're blinded by issues that exist in society, but sometimes it just takes something so ugly and so provocative to force you to open your eyes and realize that you can't just ignore the problem anymore.
You don't think it's something that truly happens now. you think that was something that happened in the past, and you don't necessarily believe it until you see it, unfortunately. And I had a question, and it's wrong. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying it's sometimes and that's where I agree with Aaron. We have to dig deeper and be a bit more curious and ask ourselves the questions and yes, and decide what we want to do about it. And this old George Floyd incident, and because you've been in the military as well, I just want to ask you a question that wasn't thought or planned. I find it difficult now when I talk to my children. So they're 5 and 3 years old. So when I see the police and I talk to my children, in terms of how you talk to them, it's hard for me to tell them the police is all good in some way. I struggle with that concept, and at the same time, I'm not sure what's the best way to talk to them about it. Because when go and talk to the police, but is it necessarily the right thing to do? And that's, I guess, discussions as Black people. You must have had these discussions since childhood with your parents as well. So I just want to know how should we talk to our children about the police in a general manner?
There's really no easy answer to that question. It's like telling your kids to drink enough water. Too much water will kill you also. So the police is both good and bad. And so they shouldn't be afraid of them, but they should be cautious of them in the right situation, in certain situations. And if they learn just how to manner themselves in general, you can kind of blend in to a certain degree. You can kind of blend into society where you won't get noticed. I only say that because I've done it. Not saying it's a good place to have to live, just to get from one day or one situation to the next, or from one part of town to the next part of town. But sometimes it's required. So I think as young people grow up and they hear the stories and they see the things, they learn and they can sense, oh, this is a comfortable environment. I'm okay to kind of be myself versus this is not. And I have a time limit here. I got 5 minutes, do my business and leave. And I think they just gain that awareness over time. But I don't think in general, kids should be taught to stay away from the police. They should just be aware that there are some police who are just not good people, and listen to your instinct and your gut when in those situations.
And that's the other, I think, degree of the white privilege we were talking about. Like, Black children from the beginning are being had to learn like what exactly you have to do. Make sure your hands are visible at all times. Be cordial, be compliant. Do all the things that the police officer tells you. Just so you don't get shot and killed. White kids don't have to think about that kind of stuff. They've never had to be taught that. Like, they can literally get pulled over and just act like buttholes and still not be in any trouble. Like, there's been plenty of times where we've seen, from news stories or whatever, like, white person jumps out the car, runs like an idiot, doesn't get shot. Like, there's so many examples of where white people do really bad stuff and still get away with it and still don't get hurt and still don't get any charges brought up against them. And then there's the opposite, the flip side of the coin, where Black people can literally be doing everything compliant and still end up dead. So it's definitely a black and white, issue, not to be, literal, but.
And I think it's important to point out that while Black people are saying we want equality, and why did you let Dylan Roof get away with this and go to Burger King or whatever craziness they did in the cop car versus, shooting this person. It's not that we're saying we want you to treat white people the way you treat us. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying kill them like you kill us. We're saying just give us the same opportunity. And I think that white people are hearing, some white people, I'm generalizing, that part of the population is hearing something that we're not saying.
And you could be saying something.
Yeah. If they're so triggered by the fact that they think that we're saying this white people think, oh, now you want them to treat us the way they treat black people. Well, if there is no problem, then why don't you have a problem being treated the way we're being treated? You know, if it's also fair, then you would have a problem being treated like black people as well. But there's clearly an issue, and you can't, you cannot ignore it. I think it is. I was just thinking about something as well as you're speaking, April, about oh, it's escaped me now. Um, about, yes, sorry, about raising our children and the conversations that we have with our children. And this is something I was telling Tanya as well soon after we met. And my children are black. I know for a fact that I will have conversations with my children about the police, about, just as you're saying, Aaron, and April, that, for example, my new partner now, who's white, does not have with his children, and he'll never need to have those conversations with his children because they will not face the same kind of discrimination or stop and search, which is a huge thing here in the UK, just random stop and search where they very vastly and proportionately stop more black men and black boys than they do white boys as well. And but yes, in terms of raising children, whether they are what kind of conversations you have with the police, quite frankly, I think it depends what color your children are. And it's completely different conversations around that. I just want to move on to another question as well. I'm just in conscious of time. Aaron, you previously mentioned the concept of being able to fit in and being able to speak out about certain things when it comes to race and so on. And it's only when you've been so-called approved by the circle of friends or family, is it then, I don't want to say the word okay, but is it then more accepted by people that you would bring up certain topics without them being triggered or without them feeling like, oh, why do we have to talk about race again? Or why do we have to talk about this uncomfortable topic again? Just, do you mind telling us a little bit more about that? I found that story really fascinating from your perspective, in terms of the whole concept of how having to fit in and then you can kind of speak up without feeling like you're a threat.
Yeah, I'm just hyper aware at all times. People, places, environment, everything, right? So I don't talk about race at all around April's family. I've only had that conversation once or twice with her father, who used to be a police, and he was asking me about, have I ever experienced some of these things, and jokingly with her younger sister. But the rest of them, I avoid it at all costs because I don't know this to be fact, but I feel that it would go the wrong way. And it wouldn't bother me probably as much as it would bother her. So I just leave that alone. Just having listened to them and being around, I've picked up on maybe I should never probably get into that. Stop pulling me.
I'm trying to get him to stop shaking the camera.
So there I'm aware, and I just say that's off limits to me. But with my friends, I can tell when they want more and they don't know how to ask for more. Right. So they want more information and they feel safe with me and they want to ask me, but they don't really know how to say it or if it's appropriate to say it. My awareness is such that I can then pick it up and then I just put it out there raw and uncut, and then we can have like a real conversation. So I'm really trying to make the people I'm talking to at ease about it, that it's okay if you don't understand, or I didn't understand all of it either. I don't have all the answers either. And then we'll have a conversation. I'll ask them questions and they'll either say, I don't know, or so we just have a dialogue. But you have to create an environment to where it's okay to not know, or to be ignorant, or to be wrong even.
Wow, you're both amazing, honestly. I could see even in the body language of the two of you, the fact that you are so mindful of, April's also reaction to the whole thing, because she gets very emotionally triggered as well about this whole concept, and it's something that's so close to her heart. And I'm aware we haven't kind of followed the script of the questions, but I think it's even more powerful what the discussions we've had. And I just want to, again, just go back to what you said about, when you talked about, what Black people are asking is not for white people to be treated the same way as they're treated, but to be treated equally to white people. And you know, one week ago, I was asking myself, so what was my main learning thing about the whole year of George Floyd and all that? And it kind of is that sentence that you just said. It's kind of, you know, the amount of forgiveness, the amount of hope, the amount of, you know, when we say, you know, you move on from the victim mode to survivor mode to victorer mode, how you know, Black people are constantly doing that on a daily basis, all the time. Whatever situation of a victim that they're in, they try to get out of it and survive that situation. And I think that's my main learning curve for this whole year, because it's so easy to remain the victim and to blame constantly, etc. And of course, you gotta also say that you're a victim to be able to instill change, but you don't procrastinate in the victim mode. And I think that's what I've learned from the whole year. I don't know what you think of that comment.
I think that's true. It kind of makes sense to me. Growing up here in the U.S. many moons ago in the 70s and 80s, if you were a Black family, in order for you to so-called make it or to do better, you were almost always chasing the white families. So you were trying to move into their neighborhood so you can have access to their school, to have access to the things that provided on that side of town. So you would move, then they would move, right? You move in, they move out as fast as they could get out. So that meant now your neighborhood is just the same, just in a different part of town. So now you got to move again. So we've constantly been chasing to have access to the things that they have access to, just normal, basic living rights, quality of life type of things. And it's always been the case. So it has never been any different. You just learn that, similar to how I guess white people are just white people. They don't know any other thing than to be just white people, whatever that comes with. All I know is that if I go to a certain part of town, I know the expectation of the people that live there, just based on what they have available to them. So I know their family's trying to make it, and I know what to make it means in their world. Now that's becoming less and less as Black people gain more resources and become affluent in certain parts of the country. But for the most part, it always means I'm chasing behind whatever scraps the white people have left that are still nice before they become totally garbage, basically.
Wow. I think it's a really, really powerful statement there as well. I think because of time, we're gonna have to wrap it up. It's been so interesting speaking to you both, Aaron and April, and I really, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your candidness as well. I think it's something that we really admire, and I think was what really brings value to our listeners as well. Just having these honest conversations where you just kind of like let it out. And so thank you for that. We usually like to leave our audience as well with something that can inspire them or educate them around these issues. Um, is there any person or book that either of you would like to recommend that you think would be interesting for our readers to get a hold of or to follow?
Yeah, I'm not much of a reader. I do listen to audiobooks, but I love movies and shows. And so I think there's a lot of really good shows and movies you can watch right now. One that really impacted me was called American Son with Kerry Washington. She was the mom and her husband was white, and he was their son had gotten into a terrible accident or something like that, got shot by the police, I think, after getting pulled over, and was in the hospital. And it's literally just her and him and maybe one other police officer in the whole entire movie. So it's just really good dialogue. But it's interesting because you can see the perspective of when the white man shows up compared to when the Black woman shows up to talk to the police about their son. It'll make your mind blow for sure, but it's definitely an interesting look at how police treat people differently based on their skin color. There's also some really great thrillers, like we watched a show called Them, which Aaron kind of alluded to when he was talking about Black people moving into white communities. It's based on in the 1950s about Compton, and there's some like weird, demonic stuff in there too. But the basis is that you can see the history of how Black people were mistreated differently than white people, even in the interest rates that they were charged to buy a home in the same community. The astronomical difference between what the interest rates were for white people versus what they charged a Black family just to move into that neighborhood, and how the whole white community treated that one family to try to push them out to keep their, Compton, which was originally a white neighborhood, to keep it, without the Black people there. And that was interesting. And I think for white people, it's so important to learn that yes, slavery, quote unquote, isn't around anymore, but how the effects of what we've done as a country have, permeated the entire system, from housing to schools to, health and wealth and anything, like that. So I think it's just so important for you to go out and learn more about how these things are still affecting us and why people still have issues with, slavery, because those are the roots of how the country is the way it is. It started with slavery, but it's not gone away. It's just changed shape and take on different names along the way.
Those are great. It's true that there's so much resource out there. That's why there's no excuse not to educate ourselves and to learn from it. And in terms of making sure that the audience connects with you, we're going to put the links of your company and everything. But what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Just go to Fayven.com, which is FAYVEN. You can send us a direct email on the Q&A tab, or even just send us an email through that too. But or if you want to email us directly, it's info@fayven.com. So
excellent. Thank you so much. It was fantastic, honestly. And Anne, you want to wrap this up, or shall I?
Yeah, go ahead, Tanya. Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much again, Aaron and April. Really, really appreciate everything you've shared and the openness. And we'll put the links to American Sun and them as well, and your company details as well when we post them on.
Thanks, everyone. Make sure you check our other interviews and follow our Facebook group as well. Speak soon. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.